I don't know how many of you are familiar with this idea of the digital footprint, but we're going to talk about what it is, what it means, and why it is important. And you, like I said, will learn about me through the process. We will talk about my own digital footprint, and hopefully this way we have some examples to talk about. So to start with the definition, I'll also say I used for the first time AI to do all of the images and things for the presentation. So if, be kind to it. It's new, they're testing it out, and I'll always be open to the feedback. But this was the image they generated when I asked them about digital footprint, the AI feature. And I think it represents well what this concept means, right? It's basically the idea is that everything you do online, all of your online activity, whether social media, applications, even just searching in your browser, all of that leaves behind a trail, right? It leaves behind a trace, sometimes called a shadow, that is tracked and stored and related to you online. So another way to think about digital footprint is there's almost like an online version of you that exists out there, an online persona based on everything that you do just in your daily life online. It's everybody has their own footprint. Everybody, just like we're all unique people, everyone has their own unique kind of profile online that is basically a bunch of information about you, your behaviors or preferences and things. So this is the concept, and we'll talk about why it's important, but it's also good to know companies have their own digital footprint, organizations, BFMI, Out Loud, all of the different organizations you all have encountered, they also have their own digital footprints. And so the same things we will talk about today, even though we'll mainly be talking as individuals, and why it's important also will apply to them. And is very important because this is for a group of people, right? So it affects more people in those cases. But today we will mainly be speaking about what this means for you as individual users and people online. Most of the time, people talk about digital footprint in two subcategories. You're passive and you're active, and we will look at both. But the idea behind this is that, obviously social media, we all choose to post things. We all choose what to like, comment, share. This is all tracked and stored about us, but so is also things you might not realize that you do online is also tracked. If you, for example, I took a taxi here and I ordered it on the phone, that also is tracked. And this is part of the more passive side of digital footprint, which we will give some examples about. So let's start with this active digital footprint, right? So this is all of the information that you have the most control over, right? These are things you consciously decide to share about yourself. Social media is the most obvious example, but it's not just, what you write on there. It might be what you reshare, post, like. It can also be the messages you send, any kind of online communication, even video chat. All of this is part of what we call the active digital footprint that you have some control over. As well, it's also things you buy online. All of that is kept about you. I'm a podcaster actually as well by training, so all of my podcast and content I create online, if it ends up on YouTube, videos we take, things like that, also ends up as part of the active digital footprint. And of course, all of the different accounts you have. So even just the fact that you might have multiple accounts is something that those that create websites, applications, and even businesses that have access to that information can learn about you. So this is maybe obvious, right? But where it gets more complicated for me is this idea of the passive digital footprint. So the things like I mentioned, I took a taxi here. Things you just use, your phone for, or tablet, or laptop, all of it creates information about you passively that is then also kept track of and stored by these websites and applications. So you can see all the examples behind me. I don't know if you've ever come across this term cookie, online cookie, not like the cookie I put there, but basically every time you visit a website, a very small text file is generated that is about what your device is, or what you as a user, your behavior, your preferences. And this is something that websites can track and store over time and basically connect. So like I said, this idea that your digital footprint is almost like another version of you out there online, part of it is what they're able to get just from logging onto a website and using a service or an application as well. So this idea of cookies and tracking data is probably the best example of what we consider passive digital footprint, right? But some things, even as I prepared for this, I didn't even think, also play into this. I mentioned the location data, for example, the fact that I'm here, for a couple days, all of that. Your cell phone towers, they collect information about where you're located. If you use Bolt or, call a taxi on the phone, all of that is stored over time. Even using, maps, Apple or Google Maps to walk somewhere. That is also all stored over time as part of this as well. Now, like fitness trackers, smartwatches is just another way that this data is picked up about you and this information is stored about you. And that can include things like your heart rate or blood sugar, things about your health. All of it is part of this profile, again, this footprint that you leave behind just by walking around every day, going for a run, going for a walk. It's all stored over time. Even your search history, maybe this is another obvious one, but even just a short question into Google, ChatGPT. If you use Siri and Alexa, even just saying, hey Siri, play this song, all of that is stored and connected to you individually online through your footprint, and is kept about you. Yes, you have a question?
You said about those digital assistants.
Yeah.
Sometimes, for example, I managed to make Siri work on my tablet offline.
Yes.
Is this, when I'm connected to the internet, automatically shared with Apple?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah. So people, I don't know if you've ever made the joke, oh, your phone is listening, because sometimes, you'll be talking to a friend about something and then later, you'll be on TikTok and some video will come about it. This is exactly how it works. And if you have it set that way, it's more likely to take that information about you and then send it off to other companies as well.
So what about the browser history? Because, there's a button.
Yeah, same. I mean, of course, any search you have will go through there. It's the same kind of idea, but you have to physically type in to use it. So it's less passive than just talking and having the Siri on, but that as well. It's the same idea. It collects all the information and stores it in essentially a massive profile about you that can then be used for other things, which we'll talk about in just a second. So I wanted to give some examples for both of these ideas of this passive and active by talking a bit about myself. So I didn't really introduce myself at the beginning, mostly because I knew I was going to be going through this with all of you. So this is the bio that I wrote and I sent off and is put up on the website for the Academy. And you can learn a lot of things about me through this, right? Where I went to school, past jobs I have, maybe where I live now. Basic information. And as I said, I wrote it. I decided to share it with all of you. I knew it would go on the website. I knew it would probably be shared on social media. So this is a very good example of the active digital footprint. I know now that if someone Googles my name, especially if they do it in Bulgarian, this probably will come up, which, I did so willingly and happily, and I had control exactly over what was shared and wasn't shared and presented to everybody, right? So this is a good example of active digital footprint, and if you look at my own social media, and I'm not very much online, but here's my Facebook. Okay, if you look at this is obviously part of my active digital footprint. So if you were to look at my social media, what could you find out about me? I mean, again, obvious things. Where I live now, where I went to school. You could see what I ate last week when I was in Romania. You can see, I took the train to Brasov in Romania, and these are the trips I took and the things I did. You might see from my profile, I was in Zagreb, I was in Budapest. So, of course, you can find out a lot about a person from their social media. And all of this is something that Facebook or Meta, the company, right, associated with Facebook, stores about you. And this is the piece, of course, you have control over. I choose to post these photos. I know my friends are going to see them. That's nothing wrong with that. But it's important to know that all of this gets stored and, as you said, shared with other companies to sell more products to you, more information to you, as we'll talk about in a second. But these are, again, nothing wrong with knowing about where I was last week. You might also learn I'm a big soccer fan. Hopefully I don't offend anybody, but I'm a English Premier League fan. I support Arsenal. So, okay, that might create tension, but you would be able to find this out easily on my profile, You would be able to see I'm Croatian in origin. My mother's Croatian. We're big Croatian soccer fans. Luka Modric is like a god in our house, we spend quite a bit of time going to games, and so these are things you, again, very easily would find out about me by just looking at my social media, and if anyone were just to look me up, could find out through my active digital footprint. But what about my passive digital footprint? I don't know how easy it is for you to see these examples, but let's say you were a company with access, or a website even, with access to, on the left, for example, my Google Maps history. You can see every search, it's me looking for cafes, bakery, coffee shops. I have a massive sweet tooth. I love cookies and cakes and sweets. I drink a lot of coffee. This is maybe like an obsession I have now. Like you can see I went on a trip last week. All my past searches were about this. Okay, fine. Another example of the passive digital footprint is the one on the right. it's my browsing history, like we talked about. I'm searching, is it normal that my dog does this and this? I got a dog a year ago, for a puppy for the first time, totally new to me, have not had a pet before. I'm constantly asking, why is he doing this? How much food does he need? How big is he going to get? All of these questions, of course. And yeah, just as proof, and because I like to talk about my dog, I put a picture of him. And then a trip I took a couple weeks ago, coffee, cake. So, okay, proof that these are real things about me. I didn't post these on social media. This is just from my camera roll, so you can see these are real obsessions of mine, right? That you wouldn't necessarily know. I mean, maybe from talking to me you would learn. But companies know these things about me because they have access to this data through my digital footprint. They have access to how often I'm looking to get a coffee or go to a bakery. They have access to all of the random questions I Google about my dog. It's all stored about me and shared between companies and shared between websites, which again is not necessarily a bad thing. But there are a couple of things to keep in mind, right, that could be a potential concern or something to be aware of. And the first reason why all of this that we're talking about is important is actually a cybersecurity angle. That all of this information about myself that I willingly or unwillingly share can be used by, hackers, the bad guys online who want to try and crack into your accounts. Whether that's trying to, generate passwords to get into accounts or try and get some financial data, something sensitive about myself. All of this information gets them that much closer to accessing those accounts and accessing things about me that I don't want, obviously, in the wrong hands. It also makes me more susceptible to different kinds of scams or, targeted cyber campaigns or information campaigns. Like, if I got an email right now about free basketball tickets, I would probably not even look at it and delete it. I don't know anything about basketball. But if I got an email, Arsenal's playing, go, you can win free tickets, I'm much more likely to just not think and just click. And as you all, I'm sure, are very aware because you've been here all week and, you all know about these things maybe even better than myself, this can open you up to different cyber concerns. It can compromise accounts and can make you more vulnerable, right, to your information being shared.
That's called phishing attack. If I just open the email without getting links inside of it, is it still a threat?
Not typically, not usually. Some technology, like very advanced technology, even yes, opening the emails, but most of us are not going to be exposed to these kinds of efforts. It's normally if you engage with it, if you forward the email on, if you click on something, download a file. If there's a file attachment, opening the file attachment could be an issue. And it's the same thing with text message. If you receive a text message like this, just best to delete it and block the number and move on. Because it's not inherently dangerous to receive it most of the time, 99% of the time. But yeah, any engagement with it can be a way that your accounts are accessed and someone might even have access to your device itself as well. Yeah. So you can see it can be quite dangerous. This is the first reason why it's important to at least be aware of this idea of digital footprint, of the things that you have about yourself online that maybe are less obvious. But here's another example. We were talking about this earlier, how your phone is listening, It's absolutely true. Ever since, I've been obsessed with coffee ever since I was like a teenager and, working too much and drinking too much caffeine and tea and things. All of my ads now, this is one that I get on Instagram all the time. It's for like this sustainable coffee pod, a very specific product I never would have normally found in a store. And I only got this ad because of all the data, that my devices have about me, how often I go to cafes, how much coffee I buy, if I buy it online, things like this. All of this makes it more likely I'm going to see ads like this, which, is not, again, necessarily a bad thing. I actually ended up buying this product. I quite like it. I have the espresso machine. The pods are very easy. They're sustainable. They reuse them. It's a good product. For me, it works well. And that is part of the positive of why, our digital footprints is useful to companies and, again, not necessarily a bad or scary thing because it can lead us to products we really like and things we really like. But let me give you another example. I told you I'm obsessed with my dog, okay? I get all of these ads now on TikTok for these different supplements and proteins and vitamins for dogs. I mean, these products that promise to make my dog live for forever. He's going to be the most beautiful dog you've ever seen. He'll never get sick. Buy these special treats, buy this special food, all of this. And I'll be honest, I love my dog. I wanted to go and investigate these products more. And a lot of them, there's actually no health benefits. There's no science or data that shows that they're effective at all. So I wouldn't go as far as to say it was a scam, but they're not so reputable products, right? So this is kind of the flip side of the coin, right? This is the other side of it. On the one hand, everything you share online and the profile about yourself online can lead you to things like, again, coffee you might actually like to buy, but it can also lead you to products that are, not reputable or that aren't suitable to you and ultimately are a bad use of your time and money, right? Again, all of this is relatively harmless. Where it gets maybe a little bit trickier is in the same way that people can market products to you and they can try and convince you to buy certain products and items. The same thing goes for ideas, right? For mis and disinformation. On the one hand, if you're very, let's say, passionate about climate change, it's great that then you can get more content suggested to you on these algorithms about a topic you're passionate about. It's not a bad thing, maybe you learn of a new political candidate that's very passionate about these things, maybe a new club you want to join, or a podcast or a book. Just like the coffee, it ended up being something I use. Maybe there are ideas that I now find interesting that I get online through my digital footprint, which there's nothing wrong with that. But like we talked about the crazy supplements and things for my dog, sometimes you also could get marketed very misleading content, lies, misinformation, and disinformation that is more, let's say, because it's tailored to you and what you like, might be harder for you to see as misleading. It might be harder for you to spot as incorrect information because, again, it's something you think is cool and want to learn more about. And as you guys probably know, the more you engage with that content online, the more of it you're going to get, the more it's going to filter to you. So you can kind of get in this cycle if you're not aware of this stuff where you're getting fed maybe some not so solid ideas or not so solid products that are kind of taking advantage in a way of what you do choose to share online or what you do purchase online or share about yourself indirectly. So this is where it can get, as I say, a little dicier, a little bit more complicated. It's not an inherently bad thing, but it's really important to be aware of this, obviously, because it can affect what you see online, and it also is a reminder that the person sitting next to me could have an entirely different set of political advertisements, set of content online, because it is tailored to them. So we might not have access to all the same information. And we both could be sharing, misleading information from our echo chamber, if you've heard this term, or from our circles, and not even realize, that we're not actually connecting with each other and actually having a conversation because we're seeing entirely different things because of the information that these websites and these companies have about us. So just like recapping what we've talked about so far, we know what digital footprint is now. It's basically any trace of yourself, any information about your hobbies, preferences, behaviors, even just the fact that you might use the internet at certain times. Every little piece of your daily routine, daily life can make up your digital footprint. It includes things you actively decide to put online, like the pictures from my Facebook I shared with you, to things you might not even realize are being stored about yourself, like where I went to get coffee this morning, right? All of that is part of your digital footprint. And it's important because really all of that information can make you more vulnerable to cybersecurity threats and information operations that are tailored to you, that you're less likely to see as a threat and therefore more likely to essentially fall into as a trap. It also can be used by businesses, as we saw, to sell you specific products, both good ones that you might be interested in and also not so good ones that may take your money or essentially scam you in a way. And then third, all of this information can be used by everybody that has access to your digital footprint. So whether that's websites and the apps themselves, actual tech teams, to companies, government actors that all have a right to access parts of this data. Everybody online, including, let's say, potentially those with ill intent towards you, can then market ideas to you that you might be less likely to look at critically and look at, do I agree with this? Do I not agree with this? Do I think this is valid, invalid? All of that is much harder to do, and it's tailored to you specifically, right? The good news is there are a lot of strategies that we have to, let's say, make it so that your digital footprint and the information about you online is not then used against you. So these are some easy ones in relation to that active digital footprint we talked about, right? Related to social media. It's honestly common sense that most of you probably already know. Think before you post something. Think before you share something. Don't overshare. Don't put too much personal information out there. If you have a bunch of old accounts, like an old Snapchat, or you have multiple accounts of on the same platform, purge the ones you don't use, because that creates vulnerability, again, for the things we've talked about. And yeah, just periodically review what's out there about yourself, periodically review what you've posted in the past, and check out your privacy settings, right? Maybe like you don't need Siri to be passively listening if it's something that you're worried about. All of that is simple things we can do to protect ourselves on social media. This is like, I kind of think of it as spring cleaning. These are other things you can just do periodically so that the information that websites and companies and everyone we've talked about has, it's just it's lessened. So just periodically clearing cookies, like we talked about cookies, you can do that in your browser settings. Making sure your devices are updated regularly, right? This protects against general cybersecurity threats, but it also, as I said, makes it so that less information about you is being changed virtually, so to speak, changing hands. Visiting only secure websites when possible. If you find yourself on an insecure website, and I think we all know what those mean, what those look like. If it doesn't have like an HTTP in the front of it and the address, something to be wary of. Just clear your browsing history, clear your cookies after that. It's just a good habit to get into when you find yourself in those places. And this last one is one even I struggle with, because it's so convenient to just have one account for everything, one account that is used on multiple platforms. But try to avoid doing that. Try and use unique usernames and not use the same, let's say, social media account for everything. So don't just use Facebook or Instagram to log on to Deliveroo or Bolt or whatever other services, because that just makes it easier for people to kind of infiltrate your profile and get all of this information about you. And then there's sort of like a next level. This is for like if you're really concerned, or if you really want to take your security, especially to the next level. Making sure you use strong, unique passwords, right? So using a different password for everything. Try not to have them have identifying information, as obvious as it would be for my password to be like Arsenal 1997 or something like that, Try not to have identifying information like that in your passwords, and have as many different ones as you can that are longer and more complicated. And you can also use encryption services or encrypted messages, and that just means basically encryption is what they do is they will take your message, let's say you wrote in WhatsApp or Signal, and even though like if I write a message to someone, it's received as I wrote it, the way that text is stored is basically scrambled up as if it's like a secret code, so that somebody from the outside can't know exactly what you said or can't access exactly what you've said or who is saying what. You can do that on specific messaging platforms like WhatsApp or Signal, but you can also do it using a VPN for essentially all of your online activities. So in theory, anything you post online or even online purchases, all of the passive digital footprint we've talked about can be scrambled up like that, so that it's harder for people to see what exactly you're doing online.
So they say that they're encrypted messages.
Yes.
How do we know for sure?
That's a good question. We don't know for sure. I mean, the good news is a lot of the platforms, especially WhatsApp, which is linked to Meta, and Signal as well, which is like another independent company, they publicly release a lot of that data to sort of prove, so to speak, or to make it easier to track when, to show that they are in fact doing it. So part of it is trusting, which is always like a hard thing online, and it's always good to be questioning, okay, is this actually happening? But all of this is publicly available information through those specific platforms. And luckily we have researchers and experts that go and verify that in fact these platforms are following through on that. National authorities, European authorities, all of that also, they're beholden to those laws and those regulations. So luckily, we have sort of outside observers to say that is being carried out. But I mean, it's a good always to question and to make sure that that's happening, especially like newer platforms. Things like Telegram, things like that, that don't do that. It's always good to kind of follow up, absolutely. And this is very related, actually, like your question is, I think, probably the most important thing, and I'm sure you've heard it a lot this week. The biggest thing you can do to kind of protect yourself from this information getting out there and being used against you is to be here like you are today and participate in the kind of activities like you have this week of just learning more about what things like digital footprint are, what make it up, why it's important, what it means, like we talked about, but also just in general, to think more critically about how you engage online with content, to think about what you're reading online or seeing online, and question everything, like you have, just ask the right questions, and at least don't be afraid to dig deeper, because this is the way that we can all protect ourselves, with how we operate online in general, and knowing what is part of your digital footprint is a big part of that. And just like with anything cybersecurity related, anything related to kind of information operations online, the more you can just slow down and think as slowly and carefully about what you're engaging with, the better. It's very hard, I mean, on the taxi ride here, I was just scrolling mindlessly, and as much as we all do it, it's also important as much as possible to just take a second, especially if we find ourselves having that emotional response to something we're reading, to just, take a minute, think about it, maybe dig deeper, ask some questions, and, think, why am I receiving this, right? Is this because I meet certain demographics? Is this because I share a lot about certain topics? Is that why I'm receiving this? And just think about it. Again, it's not always bad. It's not always like the boogeyman coming to get you, but it's important to think about why you're receiving these products, these messages, especially when it comes to some of the political topics that now blow up, are always the ones that go viral, are always the big topics, different social issues too, right? Those are the ones where just taking that extra time to think about what you're engaging with and why you might be seeing what you're seeing is a really important part of stopping the spread of misleading content and engaging with content sort of fairly and ethically as well. But this is really all I had prepared. I opened myself up for questions on this topic or really on anything else. I hope also you can share my email out, and anybody wants to write to me and chat more. I'm always available for any questions related to this or anything else really. So. Yep. So this is it.